President Tae-hyun stood at the window of his office in the presidential palace on Earth, looking out at the night sky that now held a very different meaning. 6 months had passed since the coalition defeat, and the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. Where once there had been chaos and war, there was now an uneasy peace enforced by the quiet threat of human power. The stars looked the same, but everything else had changed. Trade ships moved along routes approved by human traffic controllers. Alien governments sent regular reports to Earth about their military activities. The same species that had once dismissed humans as weak servants now waited patiently for permission to resolve their disputes. Defense Minister Hyok entered the office, carrying the daily reports from across human space. The Zenthari Republic has agreed to our final terms. He announced full reparations for every human civilian they killed, plus the surrender of their 3 largest military bases. The Makan Federation is offering us exclusive rights to their antimatter production facilities in exchange for protection from Kalari raids, and the Vorthan's President Tae-hyun asked, without turning from the window still negotiating, "But their position grows weaker every day," Minister Hyuk replied. "Without human mediation, their traditional enemies are forming alliances against them. The Ashvari have blockaded their main trade routes. The Aquarians have cut off their water supply shipments. They will surrender within days." It was remarkable how quickly 300 years of diplomatic relationships had been replaced by something more basic: fear. The galaxy had learned that humanity's role as peacekeeper had not been assigned by some higher authority. It had been chosen. And when humans chose to stop keeping peace, they proved exceptionally good at making war. Ambassador Jiwon, who had started this transformation with her simple announcement at the Galactic Council, now served as humanity's primary representative to what remained of the alien governments. The great council chamber that had once buzzed with dozens of arguing voices now held respectful silence whenever she spoke. The old system failed, she explained to a gathering of alien ambassadors, because it assumed humans would always sacrifice their own interests for galactic stability. "We are willing to maintain peace, but from now on, that peace will be maintained on human terms." The terms were surprisingly reasonable, which somehow made them more frightening to the alien species. Humans did not demand slavery or tribute. They simply required acknowledgement of human authority in all interstellar affairs. Trade would continue, conflicts would be resolved, and civilization would progress. But it would all happen under the watchful eyes of a species that had proven they could end any world that opposed them. Captain Hanul, now promoted to admiral, commanded the human fleet that patrolled the former neutral zones. His ships were no longer disguised as harmless vessels. They flew openly as warships, broadcasting their true nature to anyone who might see them. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer hiding its strength, where alien species had once depended on human arbitration. To resolve disputes, they now competed to offer humanity tribute in exchange for protection. The irony was not lost on Admiral Hanul. The galaxy had treated humans like servants for so long that when humans finally asserted dominance, the aliens naturally fell into subservient roles. A typical day for Admiral Hanul involved receiving offers from alien governments. The Skylords wanted to give humanity mining rights to their 3 richest asteroid belts. The insect hive minds offered to share their biological engineering secrets. The crystalline Ashvari promised exclusive access to their energy manipulation technology. All of these offers came with the same unspoken message: please do not destroy us. On Mars, Governor Jamin managed the largest alien refugee population in human space. Over 2 million beings from dozens of species had fled to human territory, seeking protection from the wars and chaos that had consumed their home regions. They lived in carefully monitored settlements, working in human industries and following human laws. The refugees were grateful in ways that the old alien governments had never been. They understood that humans could have simply closed their borders and let the galaxy burn instead. Humanity had opened refugee camps and provided medical care and even job training programs. A group of young Kalari approached Governor Jamin in his office. They had been born in human space and spoke perfect human language. "Sir," they said, "we want to join the human military service. We want to help protect the peace." Governor Jamin studied the eager faces before him. These aliens had grown up seeing humans as protectors rather than servants. They represented something new in galactic history, a generation that respected rather than dismissed human authority. You understand that human military service means following human orders without question? Yes, sir, the lead. Kalari replied. We understand human orders keep the galaxy safe. Our parents told us stories about the old days when everyone was always fighting. We do not want to go back to those times. The integration of alien refugees into human society was proceeding better than anyone had expected. The newcomers were eager to prove their loyalty and grateful for the protection they received. They worked hard, learned human customs, and raised their children to respect human values. Back on Earth, Intelligence Director Nari monitored the communication networks that connected the galaxy to itself. The chatter had changed dramatically from the old days. Instead of endless arguments and threats, the alien channels now carried requests for permission and reports on compliance with human regulations. The Galactic Council still existed, but it had become little more than a forum for aliens to present their problems to human representatives. The council members no longer debated or argued. They simply waited to hear what humanity had decided. Director Nari compiled her daily report for President Taehyun. All major alien governments have submitted their quarterly compliance reports, she announced. 3 minor species have requested permission to expand their territory. The Zenthari want to establish a new colony in the Outer Rim, but they are waiting for human approval. President Taehyun reviewed the reports while sipping tea from a cup made of crystalline material, gifted by the Ashvari. Everything the aliens did now required human permission, or at least human awareness. The species that had once operated as independent powers now functioned more like regional administrators in a human empire. The most surprising development was how much the aliens seemed to prefer this new arrangement. Without the constant threat of war hanging over them, trade had increased by 400%. Scientific cooperation had reached levels never seen before. Art and culture were flourishing as species no longer spent all their resources on military preparations. A message arrived from the Outer Rim territories. A new species had been discovered by exploration teams. They were called the Wanderers, and they had just achieved faster than light travel. The message was asking for instructions on how to make contact. President Taehyun smiled as he drafted the reply. Tell them to send a single ship to Earth unarmed. We will explain how things work in this galaxy as he prepared for sleep in his residence. President Taehyun reflected on the strange path that had led to this moment. Humanity had tried for centuries to be the galaxy diplomatic conscience, only to be dismissed as weak facilitators. Now they had become the supreme authority through the simple act of stopping their efforts to keep everyone else peace. The galaxy had wanted to see what would happen without human mediation. Now they knew without human restraint holding everyone back, the aliens had nearly destroyed themselves. Within months they were begging for the same human protection they had once mocked. The talks had collapsed, but from their ruins had risen something the galaxy had never seen before. A peace enforced not by negotiation, but by the quiet certainty that any species that broke that peace would face consequences beyond their ability to survive. Humanity no longer asked for respect, they simply expected it. And in that expectation a new order had been born, one where the gentle shepherds had revealed themselves as the apex predators they had always been. The galaxy was finally at peace. It was just not the kind of peace anyone had expected. President Yoon Da-yoon stood in the rebuilt Memorial Hall on Luna, where holographic displays showed the names of every human who had died in the war. The walls stretched upward into darkness filled with 2,300,000 names that glowed like stars in the artificial night. The victory celebrations had ended months ago, but the real work of peace was just beginning. Da-yoon had aged 10 years during the conflict, watching her peaceful civilization transform into something she barely recognized. The woman who had declared war with tears in her eyes now had to build a lasting peace. General Kang Woo-ram commanded the occupation forces spread across former Vorthak territories, managing the complex task of governing a defeated alien empire. His soldiers patrolled cities where the inhabitants had never seen mercy from conquerors. The aliens watched human troops with confusion and growing hope. The first surprise came when human forces began distributing food and medical supplies to Vorthak civilians. Many aliens had expected mass executions or slavery, but instead found their new rulers establishing hospitals and schools. The concept of victorious enemies who helped the defeated was completely foreign to their experience. Kong Wu Ram established rehabilitation programs for former Vorthak military personnel, offering them a choice between war crimes trials and service in the new peacekeeping forces. Most chose service, discovering that humans valued competence over species loyalty. The galaxy was learning new rules under human leadership. Dr. Li Su-jin worked in the xenological research centers that had been established on former Vorthak worlds. Her mission was to understand how an entire civilization had embraced such casual cruelty. The answers she found would reshape humanity's approach to alien contact forever. The Vorthak culture was built on the belief that might made right, and that stronger species had the natural right to dominate weaker ones. They had never developed concepts like mercy, compassion, or justice, because their society rewarded only strength and punished any sign of weakness. Su-jin interviews with former Vorthak officials revealed a species trapped by their own success. They had conquered so many worlds through fear that they had forgotten how to relate to other beings as equals. The empire had become a prison for rulers and subjects alike. Ambassador Cho Min-ho negotiated with representatives from dozens of galactic civilizations that had watched the war from the sidelines. These species had previously dismissed humanity as naive newcomers who would be quickly enslaved or destroyed by stronger powers. The ambassadors who came to negotiate with Cho Min-ho treated him with a mixture of respect and barely concealed fear. They had seen human warships tear apart the Vorthak Empire in less than 2 years, accomplishing what many thought impossible. The galaxy had learned that humanity was not to be underestimated. Some alien civilizations offered military alliances while others sought trade agreements. Everyone wanted to be on humanity's good side, now that they had proven their capacity for both war and mercy. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted permanently. Captain Kwon Jong-soo commanded the patrol vessel New Busan as it traveled the borders of human space. His crew included both humans and former Vorthak soldiers who had chosen to serve their former enemies rather than face criminal prosecution for war crimes. The integration was difficult at first, with human crew members struggling to trust aliens who had recently been trying to kill them. The Vorthak soldiers found it hard to understand why their former enemies treated them as equals rather than slaves or prisoners. Slowly, the mixed crews began to work together, finding common ground in their shared duty to protect innocent civilians from the pirates and raiders who thrived in the chaos following the wars. And Jong-soo watched with satisfaction as former enemies became trusted comrades in the depths of the Luna research facility. Dr. Choi Min-jun continued his work, though his focus had shifted from offensive to defensive applications. The terrible weapons he had created during the war remained sealed in classified storage, their very existence serving as a deterrent to future aggressors. Min-jun spent his days developing shields and countermeasures rather than planet-killing bombs. The scientist who had unleashed horrors upon the galaxy now worked to ensure such weapons would never be needed again. His research had saved humanity, but at a cost that haunted his dreams. The weapons remained in storage, not because they were forgotten, but because their existence sent a clear message to any species considering aggression against humanity. The galaxy knew these devices existed, and that knowledge alone was often enough to prevent conflicts before they started. Commander An Soo-young led the war crimes tribunals that judged former Vorthak officials responsible for atrocities against human civilians. The trials were conducted according to human legal principles, with defense attorneys and rules of evidence that confused many alien observers. The concept of fair trials for war criminals was revolutionary in galactic politics. Most species simply executed defeated enemies or enslaved them. The idea that even monsters deserved justice rather than revenge showed a side of humanity that impressed even their former enemies. Many Vorthak officials were sentenced to long prison terms, while others received community service working to rebuild the worlds they had helped destroy. The most cooperative were offered roles in the new peacekeeping administration, under careful human supervision. Captain Park Hae-won commanded the deep space exploration vessel Sol Discovery, as it carried the first mixed human-alien crew on a mission to explore uncharted regions beyond former Vorthak space. The war had ended, but humanity's destiny among the stars continued. The crew worked together despite their different backgrounds, united by curiosity about what lay beyond the known galaxy. Human scientists worked alongside reformed Vorthak engineers, while alien linguists helped decode signals from distant civilizations. Years passed, and children who had been born during the war grew up in a galaxy where humans were respected and feared in equal measure. They learned about the conflict in their history classes, understanding both the price of peace and the cost of freedom. The memorial halls filled with names served as reminders that peace was not free, and that the price had been paid by people with families, dreams, and hopes for the future. The children understood that their ancestors had chosen mercy over revenge when victory was complete. Teachers explained that this mercy was not weakness, but a choice made from a position of strength. The galaxy was safer because humanity was stronger and wiser, because they remembered the lessons written in blood among the stars. Ambassador Li Jinwu worked with the Galactic Council to establish new laws governing warfare and the treatment of civilians. His proposals were based on human military codes adapted for use by dozens of different species. The new regulations prohibited attacks on civilian targets, required fair treatment of prisoners, and established courts to judge war crimes. Many alien species initially resisted these restrictions, but the memory of humanity's response to Vorthak atrocities convinced them to cooperate. Trade routes reopened across the galaxy as former Vorthak worlds began producing goods for export rather than weapons for conquest. Mining colonies became manufacturing centers, while military academies transformed into universities. The universe had become a different place where strength was measured, not just by military power, but by the wisdom to use that power responsibly. Humanity had proven they could match any species' capacity for destruction while maintaining the civilization to choose construction instead. As President Yoon Da-yoon walked through the memorial hall reading names carved in light, she reflected on what her species had accomplished and what they had lost. The peaceful explorers who had begun this journey no longer existed, but perhaps something better had taken their place. The war was over, but its lessons remained carved into the memory of every species in the galaxy. Humanity had learned that the universe contained dangers that required strength to face, but they had also proven that strength without mercy was just another form of weakness. Children playing in the rebuilt colonies would grow up in a safer galaxy because their parents had been willing to pay any price to protect them. The names in the memorial halls would never be forgotten, and the promise they represented would never be broken. Captain Li Wu-jin stood on the bridge of the New Sol watching the stars dance past the viewports. The massive colony ship carried 50,000 people toward their new home on a distant planet called Kepler 442b. Children laughed in the corridors, while their parents dreamed of fresh air and open skies after years in the cramped cities of Earth. The ship had been traveling for 8 months through the darkness between stars. Li Wu-jin loved these quiet moments when the universe seemed peaceful and full of promise. His crew worked around him with quiet efficiency, preparing for another day of routine space travel. Nobody expected this day to be their last chief engineer park. Soare climbed up from the engine room with grease on her hands and a smile on her face. The engines hummed like a song she had written herself. Every bolt and wire on the ship knew her touch. She had spent 3 years making sure this vessel could carry families safely to their new world park. Soara walked to the captain's chair and showed him the daily reports. Everything looked perfect. The fusion reactors ran smoothly, the life support systems worked without problems, the artificial gravity kept everyone comfortable. The ship was a masterpiece of human engineering built for peace, not war communications. Officer Kim Tae-ho sat at his station monitoring dozens of radio frequencies. He listened for distress calls from other ships and watched for messages from Earth. His equipment could translate most alien languages, though they rarely encountered other species during their journey. Most aliens kept to themselves in their own corners of the galaxy. The morning shift had just begun when Kim Tae-ho noticed something strange on his screens. 12. Large objects appeared on the long-range sensors moving fast toward the new Sol. The objects were too big to be asteroids and too organized to be natural phenomena. Kim Tai-ho called out to Captain Lee Woo-jin about the approaching contacts. Woo-jin ordered the crew to magnify the sensor display on the main screen. What they saw made everyone's blood turn cold. 12 massive warships appeared on screen, their hulls covered in weapons and armor. These ships belonged to the Vorthak Empire. The Vorthak had ruled a large section of the galaxy for over 1,000 years. They controlled dozens of star systems and treated other species like slaves or pets. The Vorthak believed they were superior to all other life forms and had the right to take whatever they wanted from weaker civilizations. Admiral Krextal commanded the Vorthak attack fleet from his flagship destroyer of worlds. He had convinced the High Council that humans were soft, weak creatures who would surrender without a fight. The plan was simple: destroy a few human ships and demand that Earth submit to Vorthak rule. Krextal looked at the human colony ship through his ship's sensors and felt nothing but contempt. These pathetic creatures dared to expand into space that belonged to the Vorthak Empire. They needed to learn their place in the natural order of things. The lesson would be written in fire, and Blood Captain Lee Woo-jin tried desperately to establish communication with the alien fleet. He broadcast messages on every frequency telling them that the new Sol was a peaceful colony ship, carrying families to a new home. The humans had no weapons and posed no threat to anyone. Kim Tai-ho worked frantically at his station, sending the same message in 17 different languages, including basic Vorthak. The message was simple: we come in peace, we mean no harm. Please respond. The silence from the alien ships felt like a cold hand around his heart. The Vorthak warships moved into attack formation, surrounding the helpless colony ship like wolves circling a wounded deer. Their weapons began charging with deadly energy that made the space around them glow with malevolent light park. So-ra saw the energy readings spike on her instruments and knew what was coming. She ran through the ship shouting for everyone to find emergency shelters and brace for impact. But there was nowhere to hide from the storm that was about to break over them. The first plasma blast hit the new Sol amidships. Tearing through the hull like paper, sections of the ship exploded into space, taking hundreds of people with them. Families who had been eating breakfast together moments before were scattered to the cosmic winds. Captain Lee Woo-jin watched his ship die around him as more energy blasts hammered the vessel. Emergency lights flickered in the smoke-filled corridors while warning sirens screamed their futile alerts. Children cried for their parents who would never answer again. Park So-rae fought to keep the engines running as explosions rocked the ship from bow to stern. She rerouted power around damaged systems and sealed breached compartments, but the damage was too severe. The ship was bleeding atmosphere and dying by degrees. Kim Tai-ho managed to send one final transmission toward Earth before his communication array exploded in sparks. His last message carried across the light years like a dying whisper. They are killing everyone. Unprovoked attack. Children, they are targeting. The children. The Vorthak warships fired again and again into the crippled colony ship, showing no mercy for the helpless civilians trapped inside. Some of the weapons specifically targeted the school sections and residential areas where families lived together. The aliens wanted to make sure no one survived to tell the story. Admiral Krextal watched the slaughter with cold satisfaction, convinced that this display of power would terrify humanity into immediate surrender. The death of 50,000 colonists would serve as an example to the rest of their species. Submit or die, as the new Sol broke apart in the void, its pieces spinning away into the darkness. The Vorthak fleet departed without even checking for survivors. They left behind only wreckage and silence and the memory of an atrocity that would echo across the galaxy. The debris field continued to orbit the star where the attack happened. A few emergency pods drifted among the wreckage, but their occupants had already died from exposure to space or injuries from the attack. The Vorthak had been thorough in their work. News of the massacre traveled back to Earth at the speed of light, taking 3 days to reach human space. When the transmission finally arrived, it shattered the peaceful dreams of an entire civilization. Earth had been attacked without provocation, and 50,000 innocent people were dead. President Yoon received the terrible news in her office overlooking the rebuilt city of Seoul. She listened to Kim Tae-ho's final transmission, with tears streaming down her face as the reality of what had happened slowly sank into her mind. The attack on the new Seoul changed everything humanity had believed, that the galaxy was big, enough for everyone to coexist peacefully. They had been wrong. The universe was darker and more dangerous than they had ever imagined. President Yoon called an emergency session of the United Earth Assembly. Representatives from every nation and colony gathered to hear the names of the dead read aloud. The list took over an hour to complete 50,000 names, including 12,000 children. When the last name was spoken, the assembly hall fell silent. The weight of the loss pressed down on everyone present like a physical force. These were not soldiers who had died in battle, but innocent families seeking a better life among the stars. President Yoon stood at the podium and looked out at the faces of the representatives. Her voice was steady, but her eyes burned with a fire that had not been there before. Today, she said, the Vorthak Empire declared war on humanity. Tomorrow we show them what that means. The gentle giant had been awakened by the screams of its children, and now it would show the galaxy what happened to those who mistook kindness for weakness. Captain Song Yoon-ji stood on the bridge of the experimental warship Incheon Vengeance, watching space itself bend around her vessel. The ship carried weapons that most scientists said were impossible devices that could tear holes in reality and make enemy shields useless. Her crew had volunteered knowing they might not survive what they were about to unleash. The Incheon Vengeance was humanity's answer to Vorthak technological superiority, a warship that used captured alien science combined with human engineering in ways that violated the known laws of physics. The results were weapons so powerful that using them felt like stealing fire from the gods themselves. Yoon-ji received her orders directly from Earth Command, with classification, levels so high that even reading them required special clearance. When Vorthak forces began deliberately targeting human hospitals, schools, and refugee camps, all restrictions on human weapons development were removed forever. The first target was the Vorthak fortress world of Zelkran Prime, a planet covered in military installations that had never been successfully attacked. The world's defenses included energy shields that could stop entire fleets and weapon platforms that could crack moons in half as the Incheon Vengeance approached the fortress world. Its reality-warping engines activated. Space twisted around the ship, making it impossible for enemy sensors to track. The Vorthak defenders fired blindly into empty space while the human warship materialized inside their defensive perimeter. The first shot from the Incheon Vengeance main cannon punched through 3 separate shield layers and vaporized a weapons platform the size of a city. Yoon-ji watched the explosion bloom across her view screen and felt a cold satisfaction. The aliens were finally paying for their crimes against humanity. Admiral Tal received reports of the impossible attack from his command ship orbiting the Vorthak homeworld. Human vessels were appearing inside his fortress worlds using technology that should not exist. The humans had somehow learned to ignore the basic laws of physics. The fortress world of Zelkran Prime fell in 6 hours, its mighty defenses useless against weapons that struck from impossible angles. Tal realized with growing horror that the weak emotional creatures he had dismissed were now using science beyond Vorthak understanding. Major Lim Ki-tae led his special forces team through the underground tunnels beneath the Vorthak capital city. His mission was to capture key government officials and force them to broadcast surrender orders. The team moved like shadows through alien architecture designed to confuse human senses. Ki-tae had studied Vorthak psychology for months, learning how their minds worked and what they feared most. The aliens respected only strength and despised weakness, so his team would demonstrate both human power and Vorthak helplessness in the most public way possible. The team reached the central government complex without triggering any alarms. Vorthak security was designed to stop conventional attacks. Not human soldiers who could move through solid walls using portable phase technology. The guards never knew what hit them, Commander. Seo Hyun-woo directed the siege of the Vorthak capital system from his flagship Soul Hammer. The massive human fleet had surrounded the aliens' homeworld, cutting off all escape routes and supply lines. The siege had lasted 3 months with human forces systematically dismantling enemy resistance. Hyunwoo broadcast continuous surrender demands on all frequencies, offering the Vorthak leadership a chance to end the war before their entire civilization was destroyed. The terms were simple: unconditional surrender, immediate reparations, and war crimes trials for all military leaders. The Vorthak High Council met in emergency session as human weapons pounded their orbital defenses into scrap metal. Several council members argued for surrender while others demanded a fight to the death. The debate raged for hours while their world burned around them. Fleet Admiral Park Chan-ho commanded over 1,000 human vessels in the final battle for the Vorthak homeworld. The largest fleet in galactic history moved in perfect coordination, like a single living organism bent on destruction. Every ship carried weapons designed specifically to end the war. The battle began at dawn when human forces launched simultaneous attacks. On every Vorthak defensive position, enemy ships tried to form battle lines but found themselves surrounded by enemies that could appear and disappear at will. The traditional Vorthak tactics were useless against human innovation. Park Chan-ho watched the battle unfold from his command ship, feeling both pride and sadness at what humanity had become. The peaceful explorers who had started this journey no longer existed, replaced by warriors who could match any species' capacity for violence. Dr. Lee Soo-jin worked in a mobile laboratory following the human fleet as it advanced through Vorthak space. Her job was to study captured alien technology and develop countermeasures for any new weapons the enemy might deploy. The war had turned every human scientist into a student of destruction. The most shocking discovery was how primitive Vorthak technology actually was beneath its impressive appearance. The aliens had advanced energy weapons and strong shields, but their computer systems were centuries behind human capabilities. They had never needed to innovate because brute force had always worked. Soo-jin realized that the Vorthak Empire was like a giant with feet of clay, impressive from a distance, but fundamentally weak when examined closely. The aliens had conquered through fear and superior firepower, but had never developed the flexibility that made humans so dangerous. Lieutenant Colonel Bae-young Soo led the final assault on the Vorthak Capitol building where the alien leadership had barricaded themselves. His Marines moved through the structure room by room, forcing the defenders back toward their last stronghold. The Vorthak soldiers fought with desperate courage, knowing their empire was dying around them, but courage alone could not stop human weapons that ignored armor and shields. The Marines advanced steadily, leaving behind alien bodies and the smell of ozone from energy weapons. Young Soo found Admiral Krex Tal in the command center surrounded by dead guards and broken equipment. The alien who had started the war by massacring 50,000 innocent humans now faced the consequences of his actions. The architect of genocide would finally answer for his crimes, but when young Soo reached the command center, he found Krex Tal already dead. The alien admiral had chosen suicide over facing human justice, leaving behind only a recorded message that blamed humanity for forcing the Vorthak to wage war. The coward had escaped justice, but not judgment. The Vorthak government broadcast their unconditional surrender on all frequencies as human forces occupied their capital city. The war that had begun with the massacre of innocent colonists ended with the collapse of a galactic empire that had ruled through fear for centuries. Captain Nam Hae-jin received the surrender broadcast while patrolling the outer edges of Vorthak space. Her stealth frigate had spent months hunting enemy supply convoys and watching alien worlds surrender. One by one, the ghost ship could finally return home to a universe forever changed. The final tally was staggering. The Vorthak Empire had lost over 60% of its military forces and most of its industrial capacity. Dozens of worlds that had been slave colonies for generations were now free to determine their own destiny. General Osumi stood in the ruins of the Vorthak capital, reviewing casualty reports from both sides. Human losses had been severe, but not catastrophic, while the alien empire lay in complete ruins. The sleeping giant had awakened and its enemies had learned the price of provocation as the guns fell silent across the galaxy. Humanity stood victorious, but forever changed. The peaceful species that had explored, the stars with wonder and hope no longer existed. In their place stood warriors who had proven they could match any enemy's brutality, while still offering mercy to the defeated. The war was over, but its lessons would echo through the ages. The galaxy had learned that attacking humanity carried consequences, that few civilizations could survive. Peace was possible, but only on human terms. General Osumi stood in the war room deep beneath Geneva, watching holographic displays show the positions of every human and Vorthak ship in known space. 6 months had passed since the massacre of the New Sol, and humanity had spent every day preparing for the war that would decide their species. Fate Operation Righteous Fury was the largest military campaign in human history, combining forces from every nation and colony into a single devastating strike. The plan was simple: hit the Vorthak where they least expected it, and show them that humanity could be just as ruthless as any alien empire. Sumi had studied every war in human history, from ancient battles fought with swords and spears to the corporate wars of the previous century. She understood that victory belonged not to the side with better weapons, but to the side willing to pay any price for success. The Vorthak were about to learn this lesson, written in blood. Lieutenant Colonel Bei Young. Su led the 1st Marine Assault Division aboard the converted cargo ship Incheon Strike. His 3,000 Marines had trained for months in zero-gravity combat, using weapons designed specifically to kill Vorthak soldiers. The enemy had superior technology, but humans had superior determination. The target was Keltar 7, a Vorthak mining world that supplied rare metals to their war machine. The planet had light defenses because the aliens never expected humans to strike so deep into their territory. Young Su's mission was to capture the mining facilities and prove that nowhere in Vorthak space was safe. The assault began at dawn, when human dropships descended through Keltar 7 atmosphere like falling stars. Vorthak defenders scrambled to their weapons, expecting another easy victory against the weak, emotional humans. What they found instead was 3,000 Marines who fought like demons unleashed from hell. Young Su led from the front, charging through enemy fire toward the main mining complex. Vorthak plasma weapons scorched the air around him, but the human armor had been designed using captured alien technology. Energy blasts that should have killed him, instead, left only scorch marks on his chest plate. The Vorthak had never faced enemies who used kinetic weapons instead of energy blasts. Human bullets punched through alien shields like they were made of paper, followed by explosive charges that their sensors could not detect. The defenders found themselves outgunned by supposedly primitive human technology. What shocked the aliens most was discovering that humans took prisoners. When Vorthak soldiers surrendered expecting immediate execution, young Su Marines instead provided medical care and followed something called the Geneva Conventions. The concept of mercy toward defeated enemies was completely foreign to Vorthak. Culture Captain Nam Hee-jin commanded the stealth frigate Soul Vengeance as it prowled through Vorthak supply routes, like a shark hunting in dark waters. Her ship used technology that made it nearly invisible to enemy sensors, allowing her to strike merchant convoys without warning. Hai-jin specialized in hit-and-run attacks that drove Vorthak commanders to distraction. Her squadron would appear from nowhere, destroy supply ships, and vanish before reinforcements could arrive. The aliens had no effective counter to these guerrilla tactics because their military doctrine assumed direct confrontation. The psychological effect was devastating. Vorthak supply crews began jumping at shadows and demanding heavy escorts for routine missions. The human ghost ships were everywhere and nowhere, turning simple cargo runs into nightmares that haunted alien dreams. Admiral Ryu Dong-min commanded the largest human fleet ever assembled as it prepared for the Battle of Wolf 359. 200 ships carrying the hopes and rage of an entire species moved toward their destiny. The Vorthak had sent their own grand fleet to crush human resistance once and for all. The enemy formation was impressive, over 300 warships arranged in the traditional Vorthak battle line that had conquered dozens of species. The alien admiral, confident in his numerical superiority, broadcast a surrender demand, expecting the humans to flee rather than face certain destruction. Ryu Dong-min's response was to order his fleet into an attack formation that no military academy had ever taught. His ships moved in seemingly random patterns that confused Vorthak targeting computers. While coordinated swarm tactics overwhelmed enemy point defenses, The battle raged for 18 hours as human ships danced around their heavier opponents like fighters circling a giant. When Vorthak vessels tried to concentrate their fire, the human fleet scattered only to reform and strike from unexpected angles. The aliens had never faced such unpredictable tactics. Dr. Sung-Ji Woo watched the battle reports from his laboratory on Titan, where he had spent months developing biological weapons that targeted Vorthak physiology specifically. When news arrived that the aliens were using nerve gas against human colonies, Ji Woo activated his most terrible creation. The engineered virus spread through Vorthak military bases like wildfire, targeting the alien respiratory system with surgical precision. Entire garrison forces collapsed within hours, unable to breathe their own atmosphere. The weapon was so effective that Ji Woo himself felt sick at what he had unleashed. Commander Seo Hyun-woo led Special Forces operations deep behind enemy lines, targeting Vorthak infrastructure with surgical strikes. His teams moved through alien cities like ghosts, sabotaging power grids, communication networks, and manufacturing facilities. The Vorthak military found itself blind and deaf as their empire crumbled from within. Communications went dark between star systems, while industrial worlds ground to a halt. Hyun-woo had learned that destroying an enemy's ability to coordinate was more effective than destroying their armies. Major Lim Ki-tae specialized in psychological warfare, broadcasting messages to Vorthak forces that offered surrender terms while demonstrating human military superiority. The aliens slowly realized that their supposed easy victory had become a nightmare of endless human resistance. The tide of war turned decisively at Wolf 359, when Admiral Ryu Dongmin fleet achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. A Vorthak Grand Fleet retreated in disorder, abandoning the field to human forces. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Captain Song Yoon-ji piloted the experimental warship Incheon Vengeance, armed with weapons that pushed the boundaries of known physics. Her crew had volunteered for missions, classified as ethically questionable, knowing their actions would haunt their dreams but potentially end the war. The Vorthak homeworld outer defenses crumbled under assault from weapons they could not comprehend. Human ships seemed to phase in and out of reality while their projectiles ignored shields and armor. The aliens faced technology that violated everything they knew about the universe. Admiral Krex, Tal, the architect of the war, watched in growing horror as his fortress worlds fell, one by one. These were not the weak emotional creatures he had expected, but something far more dangerous. The humans had become monsters equal to any nightmare the galaxy could produce. The Vorthak Empire, which had ruled through fear and superior firepower for over 1,000 years, began to collapse under the weight of human vengeance. Species that had been enslaved for generations watched in amazement as their masters fled before the advancing human fleets. General Osu-mi received reports of victory after victory as her forces pushed deeper into Vorthak space. The plan was working better than anyone had dared hope. The sleeping giant had awakened, and its rage was reshaping the balance of power across the galaxy. The war was far from over, but the momentum had shifted decisively. Humanity had proven they could match any enemy's brutality, while maintaining enough civilization to offer mercy to those who surrendered. The galaxy would never underestimate human resolve again.